Hello everyone, and welcome to Hyperanalyzing LCS, the series where I discuss the biggest moments from the LCS and give attention to the tiniest details that can decide the outcome of a game. This week I will look at some plays from Week 7 of the 2022 LCS Summer Split. CLG bested Cloud9 in this lengthy sequence that ends with CLG picking up the Hextech Soul and Baron buff.
At about 7,000. CLG backing away. They do not want to flip this. Blabber's coming in, throws down the pillar. Poom getting everybody away there, making sure they're all hasted, staying together. Dokla still defending the tier 1 turret. This tier 1 mid turret for CLG still alive 32 minutes into the game. Fudge getting caught out as Contrax is ready to go spin, and Palafox reverting his position yet again as Contrax has to fall back. Accelerated Shock Blast finds Fudge, and he burns away to Poom's Ignite. It's a 1-0 for CLG, and Berserker does not want to give them a second. Luger flashes in, Sven's gonna take some damage, and Berserker gets rooted up. Contrax in hot pursuit, and he's looking to take down the Cloud9 AD carry. Can he close the distance? He's hasted up. Return to Monkey. Yes or no? Yes, indeed. Away you go. Contract picking up another.
It's still going though. They were gonna do Baron. C9 was gonna sneak Drake, and now Palafox is caught.
Palafox getting away. He flashes over the wall. He gets away from Jensen's ulti. Now Jensen seeing what else he might be able to find, and it's only a tombstone. Dokla on a killing spree.
This play starts at the Baron pit, where CLG start the Baron but do get forced away by C9. Blabber slows down CLG with the pillar, but between Seraphine's shield and Shirelia's battle song, CLG easily disengages. A ward behind the Baron pit critically sees Fudge's movements into and out of the brush. The 4 CLG players make their way around the backside of the Baron pit, and with that ward they are ready to face Fudge when he walks back into the brush and into the CLG squad. Fudge immediately gets rooted by Luger, and the Seraphine E does root instead of slow due to the ability's interaction with Riley's Crystal Scepter. Once Fudge gets rooted, he pops Riposte to hopefully survive the attack from the rest of CLG, but Riposte ends just before Contrax knocks him up with Cyclone. Fudge flashes and uses Stopwatch, which does allow him to avoid both the Seraphine and Yone ultimates, but he does still exit stasis into the second cast of Cyclone. Since Palafox doesn't hit anyone with the Yone ultimate and it puts him in the middle of C9's team, he immediately recasts Soul Unbound to get away. Berserker then turns his attention to Contrax, and his damage forces Contrax to flash away, giving Fudge an opportunity to potentially escape. However, Dokla walks up from mid lane and hits a big accelerated shock blast, putting Fudge low enough to be finished off by Luger's Leandru's Anguish and Poom's Ignite. CLG begins chasing down the rest of C9, with Luger leading the charge. Luger flashes forward over Sven's Aqua Prison, and he slows Sven with a double cast of his Q, procking Rayleigh's Crystal Scepter. Luger then turns his attention to Berserker, hitting him with a root, although Berserker is able to use Cleanse and Flash to get away. Sven escapes and starts heading towards the spawning Hextech Drake, but Contrax and Poom continue chasing Berserker. Berserker is able to get back to his turret with a sliver of health left, but Poom flashes to get in range for a movement speed boost on Contrax, helping him catch up and finish the kill. Meanwhile, the rest of Cloud9 all start heading towards the dragon to prevent CLG from claiming the Hextech Soul. Palafox uses his teleport to make sure Cloud9 cannot rush down the dragon before CLG arrives. Jensen recalls for health, but also spends his teleport to get to the dragon, and a few seconds later Dokla teleports in as well, making this an eventual 3v2 in favor of Cloud9. Blabber tries to pick off Palafox by slowing him with a pillar, and Jensen dives forward to sweep him back with Emperor's Divide, but Palafox flashes to get over a wall and dodge the Azure ultimate. Palafox then jumps away with Soul Unbound to avoid dying to the Sand Soldiers, but both teams know that Palafox will be forced to snap back to the spot he cast Soul Unbound. After Dokla teleports in, he waits for a second in the brush as Jensen steps closer, unaware that Dokla is there. Once Dokla engages, his damage forces Jensen to flash if he wants to survive. Jensen chooses to flash aggressively over the wall, hoping to finish off Palafox, but without a Sand Soldier available, Jensen can't hit Palafox since he doesn't have vision in the brush. This traps him in a corner with Palafox on one side and Dokla on the other, and Jensen stays close enough to the river's edge for Dokla to jump onto him from the other side of the wall and take him down. As this is happening, Blabber and Sven try and fail to catch Palafox when he ends his Soul Unbound. Sven goes for a predictive Aqua Prison where Palafox would return, and Blabber uses his flash over the wall hoping to send Palafox back into the river with the Blast Cone. However, once Jensen falls, Palafox then snaps back to his Soul Unbound location and immediately uses Stopwatch, avoiding Blabber's Blast Cone trap. Dokla and Palafox now have the upper hand, especially with Luger teleporting to the bot lane turret, so Blabber and Sven start to run away. However, Contrax and Poom are now coming from behind Sven after they finish chasing Berserker. This leaves Sven with no escape routes, and he runs towards the enemy base. He actually does a great job avoiding damage from Dokla and stunning him, giving him a chance of dying without giving over extra gold, but Dokla eventually hits him with an accelerated shock blast, and Poom finishes him off with an empowered Q. CLG wins this incredibly extended play 4 kills to 0, and they use their advantage on the map to claim both the Hextech Soul and the Baron. As a fight broke out around the dragon, Blue outplayed Immortals in a 1v2 as Sylas.
Blue's trying to flank. It's really important that someone marks him, maybe Revenge, because otherwise he can get a really good angle onto Lost as the Ornn ultimate comes in and pushes him back.
All right, the Drake's at half. Here
we
comes
go.
the Ornn Horn.
Okay,
Boon's
Revenge.
ready to fire off. Finds the knockup onto Lost. Blue stealing away the Draven ulti now. Dignitas with control over the pit. They're going to secure the Drake for themselves. Revenge down to about 1/3 HP as Blue and Revenge are in the 1v1. Oh! Gets the outplay with a stopwatch. Nicely done. Hoon's going to drop on the other side of the fight as Blue looks to finish off Blue. Blue wants to turn it around here with a Kingslayer. He doesn't quite find it, but he gets the kill anyway. Blue just 1v2.
Immortal starts the dragon, but Dignitas contests with Blue flanking from the bottom side of the river. Hoon starts the fight with Call of the Forge God, which knocks up Lost as Revenge turns to keep Blue at bay. Blue sidesteps the knockup from Revenge and the Yone ultimate before stepping forward and stealing the Draven ult, although I do believe he intended to take the Amumu ult instead. Regardless, Blue makes good use of the Draven ult, which passes through most of the enemy team and importantly hits Revenge twice, who Blue is currently fighting 1v1. With the space bought by the Ornn ult and the risk of a Sylas flank, the rest of Dignitas push into the Dragon Pit and take the dragon away from Immortals. As the Drake goes down, two separate fights start. Kenvi moves downward to help out Revenge in his duel against Blue, who deals a lot of damage to Revenge, hitting both parts of Whirling Death and both parts of Chain Lash. At the same time, a 4v3 starts in the Northern River as Ignor hits Hoon with Bandage Toss following Hoon's Searing Charge. This carries Ignor deep into the Dignitas team, where he roots 2 with Curse of the Sad Mummy before flashing away. This allows Lost to finish off Hoon, but the rest of Dignitas get away, with Exu building distance with Heartbreaker and Bifrost staying alive with his thick skin shield before devouring Spawn through the Dragon Pit wall. Meanwhile, Blue is having his 1v2 against Revenge and Kenvi, which we get to see from Blue's POV. His attempt to dash away with Abscond gets interrupted by a knockup from Revenge, but Blue does land the second part of his E for a brief stun. Then he gets a big heal as Kingslayer comes off cooldown, and he casts another Chain Lash before using Sonia's Hourglass, and Revenge falls to the Chain Lash explosion. Blue's stasis ends just as Kingslayer comes off cooldown again, and once again Blue gets a big heal, preventing Kenvi from finishing him off with Dragon's Rage and Resonating Strike. Blue flashes away towards the bot lane brush, but he saves his E to re-engage once Kingslayer comes off cooldown, jumping back out of the brush and getting another big heal as Kenvi flashes away, although Kenvi does hit Blue with Sonic Wave. Blue just barely misses the second part of his E, and now having no chain to stop Kenvi's dash, Kenvi dives back in with Resonating Strike. Blue is ready for this and casts Chain Lash at his feet, and for the third time in this fight, he crucially hits the explosion part of Chain Lash as well, and with a couple of passive and powered auto attacks, Blue is able to take down Kenvi and win the 1v2. CLG won this long and chaotic teamfight against FlyQuest.
CLG is just turning back towards Jose and Johnson. Now Afromu rotating up here as well. Jose going in. He's going to subjugate Poppy immediately, and the fight breaks out. Contracts walking away. Dokla here on the front line, but Gwen is immune for the time being. Trying to get the snip on the multiple targets. Dokla trying to get himself out of the fight now as FlyQuest takes a lot of damage into a lot of health bars, and Luger is grabbing himself the first kill. Philip now trying to stand and fight in the middle of a 1v3. Riposte is down, but he's in Kui's help. They'll make it a 1-for-1 as they lose contracts for Philip. 2 dead on the side of FlyQuest, 1 on CLG, and CLG are looking to find some more. Poom goes in for the slow, and Palafox has the follow-up. Luger with a little bit of poison over the wall, won't be able to find enough damage to grab anybody just yet. As looks for more, and he finds it. The Emperor picks up the 4th kill of the game, make it the 5th as well.
19 minutes into this game, CLG sends 3 players top lane towards Takui, but they call off the play as Takui is far enough back to get away, plus Philip spends his teleport to give his mid laner some backup. However, as CLG head back down the river, they now get surrounded by the rest of FlyQuest, and this quickly becomes a full 5v5. Jose Diodo has a well-placed pillar to cut off the 3-man squad of CLG, but CLG gets away fairly easily with Palafox dashing over it with Shifting Sands, Contracts popping Phase Rush to run past it, and Dokla avoiding damage with Hollowed Mist. Dokla does have the hardest time getting past the pillar though, and FlyQuest attempts to turn on him within his mist. However, Poom helps Peel with Wild Growth, and Dokla is able to do a ton of damage as he hits all 3 nearby FlyQuest players with his 2nd and 3rd charges of Needlework, and hits the 2 frontliners with a big Q. This leaves 3 FlyQuest members with low health, and Luger attempts to make a big play, flashing into the river and popping Spray and Pray. Johnson has to flash away to survive, and Luger is able to cleanse a stun from Afromu, securing a kill against the enemy support and forcing Takui to flash as well. Meanwhile, Philip dashes through the blue buff pit to get into the fight, but he ends up being right in front of Contracts, who immediately slams him into the wall. This isolates Philip in a 1v3, and his attempt to get back over the wall is stopped by Contracts with Steadfast Presence. Philip eventually gets over the wall with his flash, but Palafox is able to follow him with Shifting Sands, although Contracts' heroic charge pushes Philip away from Emperor's Divide. Takui hits Contracts with a Sleepy Trouble Bubble through the large wall, and he follows up with a long-range Paddle Star, taking him down with Philip's help. However, Palafox does finish off Philip for CLG's 2nd kill. With Dokla leaving the fight, this is now a 3v3, but CLG has much better health bars and they make the call to chase. Poom flashes to cast his E on Johnson, moving picks forward and extending the reach of his Glitter Lance to slow both Johnson and Jose Diodo. Palafox places a soldier over the wall and dashes back into the river before moving the soldier forward to attack Johnson. Johnson does spell shield the slow, but Poom casts Whimsy on Palafox to help him chase down FlyQuest. Takui hits Poom with Sleepy Trouble Bubble, but Poom is not the threat and Palafox has enough damage to push away FlyQuest 1v3. Palafox hesitates as he enters the brush, afraid of a FlyQuest turn from behind the next wall, and as Palafox takes a step backward, he does avoid Takui's Paddle Star, which likely would have done enough damage to dissuade Palafox from chasing further. Palafox also makes that backwards movement while still attacking Takui and Jose Diodo with his Sand Soldiers, putting them at very low health. This prompts Palafox to flash forward, getting close enough for him to reach Takui with his soldiers and claim another kill. Poom then casts another Whimsy to speed up Palafox again. Jose Diodo attempts to disengage with the pillar, but Palafox is able to bypass it with Shifting Sands, which he combines with his Q to extend the range of the dash and get close enough to summon another soldier next to Jose Diodo to pick up another kill. With that, CLG wins the extended fight 4 kills to 1 and they turn to take the Baron just as it spawns. 51 minutes into that game, CLG made this play for the win.
It's almost done. CLG minions working away.
Philip's going to stop it. He wants to prevent this from going down for free, but CLG's taking the chance. They're going after the Baron, seeing Philip up there in the top side. Remember how fast they burn this down. FlyQuest moving up. They don't want to give it away. Philip coming in now for the TP. There's the cooldown CLG was looking for. They bring Philip back here.
They counter TP to the counter TP.
Now they know FlyQuest doesn't have a way to get back in there and match him in time. Dokela's going for the in-hit, and CLG have found the macro outplay for now. What is FlyQuest's answer as CLG disengages with a full
double TP? They're going for it.
To bring Palafox in. They want to go for the end of the game as FlyQuest are trying to get back to the base. Philip wants to survive, but Palafox wants to stop it. The Nexus turrets are gone.
CLG starts at the Baron and they have a big top lane minion wave crashing into the enemy inhibitor. This forces Philip to recall and clear the minions, which also means he has to use his teleport to get back to the fight. As soon as Philip starts channeling his teleport, CLG backs off of the Baron. Dokla in particular immediately runs up river where he can then use his own teleport to get to the enemy base now that FlyQuest has no way to quickly get back to defend. This prompts Philip to immediately leave the fight again to defend his base. Note that at this point Philip is safe to recall, which would get him back to base faster, but he opts to run back instead. CLG maintains pressure on the Baron to keep FlyQuest nearby, but they once again pull away and this time it's Palafox who backs off extra far to channel his own teleport, making it a 2v1 in the enemy base. In the base, Dokla uses Needlework to clear the minion wave and he still has a small wave of his own as he pushes towards the Nexus. It gets a little awkward as Palafox actually teleports to the cannon minion before it reaches turret range, causing Dokla to take turret aggro instead. Dokla still has one more charge of Needlework, which he uses to slow Philip's approach, and the CLG duo take the first Nexus turret without Dokla losing much health, partly thanks to the Ocean Soul. Back by the Baron, Takui is the next closest to the FlyQuest base, and he starts running back to defend. Once again, he could safely recall, but he doesn't actually lose much time running back since he uses Ghost. The 3 remaining CLG players in the river chase down Aphromoo and Johnson, but they do not stop Jose Diodo from recalling in a nearby brush. In the base, the CLG duo attempts to take down Philip, but Philip is able to barely dash behind the Azir wall before it would have pushed him into Dokla. Takui arrives next and uses his flash to hit a long-range paddle star on Dokla, who he is quickly able to take down. Unfortunately for Philip, the Fiora Vital Point spawns on the opposite side of Palafox, making it difficult for Philip to quickly burst him down. Jose Diodo arrives with his recall and attempts to knock Palafox away from the Nexus with the pillar, but it doesn't knock him out of attack range, so Palafox is able to continue hitting the Nexus, and he focuses down the Nexus to end the game. Thank you for watching Hyperanalyzing LCS. Hit subscribe and come back next week for my analysis of Week 8.